Welcome to Santa Barbara Talks with Josh Molina. It's my pleasure today to be here with architect Jeff Shelton. And it's going to be a little bit of a different kind of podcast today, a little bit hopefully fun and entertaining, because we're talking to an architect who is just fantastic and fabulous, and somebody whose buildings have his signature on them. So we're going to go through them. But first, Jeff, how are you doing today?
Doing great. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's dive right in. I want to talk to you about what I've been writing about recently, which is 700 State Street and this building that's on the corner of Ortega and State Street, where you are looking to, put the Jeff Shelton stamp on it. We've got some blue and white colorful arches. We've got a palm tree. You're putting in sort of like more sunlight into the building. And that rendering that you showed, at the meeting was like fantastic, because obviously it's art, and it's like not gonna look like that in terms of the streetscape. But I just want to ask you, so Jeff Shelton's coming to downtown to State Street. Now you're part of this whole reinventing Santa Barbara conversation. So can you talk to me a little bit and talk to the audience about this project and what it is and why it's so special?
Absolutely. Well, every project is special. So I take on every project that like it's my only project, and it's the last project I'm going to do. So, and quite frankly, I don't come to put stamps on anything. I sort of come to first resolve the functional issues. It's quite boring, by the way. I don't know if your audience wants to know about that, but just quite meticulous, tedious, but solve the problems of the function from the inside. And then I let it drift outside. So, and then I see what I got. So it's really laying the whole base for the building to see what we have, and then looking at it from the outside. What does the street need? So what is really the State Street need in this case at that location? And so I try to keep, once again, I don't try to put a stamp on anything. I try to celebrate the situation. Mm-hmm. And make sure it's appropriate for the owner and for the city and for the person who's just walking by. And if I stay on that path, I think it usually turns out. Now you might see some things that come back and forth into my architecture, which might be considered a stamp of some kind, but we're always playing with the plaster, right? We're always having a soft plaster that these guys in town get to do. These fantastic plasters get to show their stuff and just put a little bit of their life in the building. I use tile a lot. That's what it says in the guidelines. And so I use plaster tile and everything they say in the guidelines. And it celebrates that entry, and it celebrates State Street starting to go uphill there, leaving Lower State, heading up. And then one part of the program was also to turn it down Ortega Street. So a lot of these buildings, if you look at an aerial view of State Street, they're just a bunch of boxes with a front thin facade. So I wanted to make this building have some depth to it and turn the corner, and hopefully commercial businesses, et cetera, head down both ways, Ortega Street and any cross street. And try to keep, this town's been a linear town up State Street. Let's broaden it up. People can walk sideways here, they can head out to the neighborhoods. So I put all that together, try to celebrate those moments. That moment when it's all done, no one cares about our review meetings. But it's a corner building. It starts State Street going up the hill and going down Ortega Street. So it's celebrating, and try to keep it to the right amount of celebration, I think.
Yeah. Do you think about these buildings, at 2 a.m.? Does the idea come to you? Do you clock in at 9 o'clock in the morning and say, I'm going to now design this building? Can you help me understand your creative process? Because you obviously are somebody who has you do things differently than most architects in Santa Barbara. What is that like for you? How do you think of these ideas?
Well, like I said, I I really think of the technical stuff first.
Yeah.
Try to understand the structure of, in this case, an existing building. What are the code issues that are going to be coming up, exiting, etc.
Yeah.
So I really kind of do not want to think about a design first. You know, it's sort of you just want to keep everything open. As soon as you start going into design, you maybe might start boxing yourself into a corner and remodeling create some idea that you might get. So once I work the inside, work the functions of the inside, then I do start to wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning at that point,
Right.
understanding what's left, what's available. And so the key is not to design too early for me. If I have to, okay, but it might be somewhat superficial, right? So the more time I have to stop and get the functions going, then those are the times when you're, you know, the so-called, you're in the shower and you think of something, or you're throwing a frisbee and things come up, and you can release yourself to seeing the possibilities. So that's a critical part, to not bring baggage. I tell clients, don't bring baggage to my office, and I'll leave my baggage outside.
Right.
And that way, you know, clients will come in and say, my favorite thing is this. And I'll say, I don't want to hear about your favorite thing. We're looking at the site right now. Your favorite thing later might fit here, but it might not. So I'll get rid of my favorite things if you get rid of your favorite things, and let's see what the site tells us is needed.
Okay. I want to talk about some of your buildings that I've written about over the years, but I just want to ask this question: is how do you get away? And I don't mean that as a bad thing, okay? Because, you know, I'm downtown with my kids or something, and they'll be like, look at that building, you know, and it's one of your buildings, right? So I don't mean that in a bad way, but how are you able to design these buildings in a city that is known for strict, rigid standards at ABR, at HLC? Does your reputation precede you? They know it's Jeff Shelton, so they get, you know, they're going to work with you. And why don't we see other architects doing stuff like what you're doing?
Well, first of all, the fact that your kids are noticing architecture is worth everything I do. Yeah. So I get that from kids. I get parents bringing 8-year-olds in here. I get 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds calling me to come into the office. So to see what the heck's going on. And so that itself means at least we're engaging them, engaging people. And I get older people too, by the way. But to have kids excited is worth it all. It shows them you can do stuff, and you can have possibilities in their lives. And you can think, maybe if you want to call it outside the box, I don't think it is. I think it's right where everything should be. But you can think and go after it. So as far as other architects, you know, well, as far as what I do, I'm basically doing what I thought we were supposed to be doing. So, you know, I grew up in the hills here, and I watched the beatniks build their houses out of bottles, and you know, Frank Robinson and all those guys. Just, you know, that was it for me. I was bit by the bug right there. I went to school, and you know, you think you know everything, right? You know nothing, and but you're turned on to these architects that do a project from start to beginning, everywhere from the building to the fabric to the forks and knives. And so I sort of, you know, 1880s to World War I, I sort of, I guess, fell in love with that idea of building people, craftspeople in the area, building the buildings. They're not out of catalogs, they're built by people. And that whole process is what I fell in love with. But I still thought and think that's what architects are supposed to do. So what other architects are doing, I don't understand that. I don't understand not doing this. Yeah. So it's a difficult question. I think I'm doing it the normal way, actually. So, and I've been fortunate to have clients come in for that reason. They want to be part of the process. And we've, you know, I guess I get architects saying I'm lucky the people I get to work with. Well, we sort of invented it and nurtured it. You know, I have basically one contractor, but there's others, and a whole group of people that are these artisans, and I call it sort of a guild of some kind. And we get to job sites. Everyone is into it. This thing. They're not showing up for just a paycheck. They're getting a paycheck, but they're showing up to participate in seeing how this thing turns out and making it a little bit better.
So, why don't we have other architects? And I mean, obviously, I'm sure there's a lot of architects doing a lot of really cool stuff. But what I mean is, why don't we see more architects maybe trying to take a little bit more of that approach or that attitude, not to copy you, but to sort of do things that are, unique to their brand. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, we have to take a little bit of a chance. And maybe I make money on some jobs and maybe I don't on some others. I sort of don't look at that part.
Yeah.
We just go forward. I'm not going to let a building the drawings get out of this office if it's not going to be what I think is the best possible thing I could do.
Right.
So that costs money sometimes. And quite frankly, I don't do that math. I signed up to do a good building. It's gonna work out. Mm-hmm. I've got to go on for an earlier question you had about, you said in quotes, how do I get away with it? You weren't meaning that, but I come in there with every detail. So I believe I'm actually doing exactly what the rules, the guidelines say. Yeah. I come in with every detail worked out pretty good, so I'll work on it for 5 months and then show up there for 15 minutes. They got 15 minutes to tell me I'm doing a good job or a bad job. That's not an easy job those guys have. And they know that we're not going to let go of this thing until we're drinking wine at the end of the job at the on the deck somewhere.
Right.
I think they do have faith in that because I will not let that happen. It won't happen here.
Yeah. What were you like as a kid? You talked a little bit, and I read a little bit of your bio, sort of how you grew up, and I think you were raised like in a library. You didn't really have a traditional house until you were much older. Were you a creative, playful Legos kind of kid? Were you drawing? Were you sketching? Help me understand that part of your life.
Yeah. I got to read that bio too. I should have read that first. See what you say I did, but no, I was the fourth boy of family, fourth son. So my brothers, all artists, sort of invented the world for me. So by the time I came around, it wasn't I had to do that. It was that's what is done. That was reality. So it wasn't like, oh, you've got to be an artist. It was just everyone just did stuff like that. So that was it. My dad played the trumpet, a jazz musician. He ended up working at Westmont, but it was always art. There was always some other way of looking at things, and the standard way of looking at things was not really honored very much. In fact, it was a place you shouldn't go. We rented a library in a library of an old boys' school. Then we had to move to the infirmary. Then we had to move to the classroom. So, yeah, we rented, and finally bought something. And so that was funny when I finally moved into a house in college. It was the first time I'd been in a house. Slept in a house. But I was, everybody drew. Everybody draws in the Shelton family in some way. It was sort of, that's our communication. Maybe it's like cavemen or something. That's maybe where we are. But you just draw, and that's how you basically, one of the ways to express yourself. And so once you find out you're drawing from kindergarten on, you're doing all the drawings for every class. But I think one of the great things that I got to have is their love for sports, because that really helps architecture. And I was basically a hardworking athlete my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
And so, all the way up through high school, with Jack Triguero at Santa Barbara High School was perfect for me. Perfect combination of art and crazy discipline. Somehow I ate that up, and I still eat it up. If I get defeated, doesn't matter. I'll go, stand back up and take, go after it again.
Let's talk a little bit about some of your projects. I wrote a long time ago, feels like a long time ago, about the Ablitt House. It was the small but tall tower, and Neil Ablitt only had this small piece of land. I forget the backstory on why he only had that, but so he had this piece of land, and I guess he came to you, or you came to him and said, let's build something there. And it's a remarkable piece of architecture. People may see the top of it if they're around, but you really kind of have to go behind the hotel and the bar and sort of like see it, maybe get a tour. Can you talk a little bit about the Ablitt Tower and why you designed it that way?
Well, I met Neil. I was working on the Pistachio House, and he came up to me and said, he and Sue, I was actually tiling a blanket up there, and he said hey, I'm Neil Ablitt. I've got a lot. I want you to design a house on. I said, I'm too busy. He says, it's 20 by 20. I said, I'll take that job. And, without looking at it. So we got off the bar, went over, took a beer over to the lot, and he had a 20 by 20 lot he bought for $5,000 years ago to park cars for Ablett's cleaners. And so he just had 2 cars there, and the alley was all dirt. And so I went into the city the next day with little plans about like this big. And I thought I'd get thrown out. And the planning department said, this might work. And I went to transportation. This might work. And I thought, wait a second. I didn't get thrown out. So I told Neil, I said, Neil, I can't recommend that you proceed on this job, but I'll do it. You don't have to pay me unless we get a permit. Wow. So I called my bookkeeper up and said, don't tell me how much I'm spending on this thing. And we went through the process, and I got to hand it to the landmarks committee. They just shook their head like, Jeff, okay. Mm-hmm. I guess it's in the middle of the block. No one will see it. And they were very kind. It's like it had all the elements of the guidelines, but maybe it didn't. They're just oddly put in that form, and they approved it. So I hats off to Historic Landmarks, and it got appealed by the Planning Commission, and I went and overturned it at City Council.
Yeah.
It was a job. Once I saw the lot, I had to take it, and it just felt like these 20 by 20 jobs just don't come around too often. I better take it, right, and lose money on it if I have to.
Did you have an inspiration? Were you able to say, oh, I know of a 20 by 20 4-story building somewhere else? Or is really just like, wow, I'm going to make something for the first time here?
No, I didn't look around. I'm not a great studier of things, and I don't do research for anything. My inspiration was, how can I get a car in and get the stairs up? I mean, that's all you did. Mm-hmm. And then I had fun with what was left. It was back to that first thing I was saying. Find out what you can do and see is there anything left on the table to make it more of an enjoyable project. I mean, the clients said they wanted books, wine, and something else, like a tile. So I gave them that, and a blue stove. That's all they wanted. So, we were building it, and they would come in. Sometimes they'd shake their head and go, oh my God, and turn around and go back. I don't know if they studied the plans much, but the Ablets were fantastic. They just let me go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So transitioning into one of your other projects, and I want to talk to you a little bit about the decorative part, the fixtures, how you decide the shapes of the tables, the stairwells, the railings. Looking at El Jardin, right, which has got this reputation for being what is it, the Dr. Seuss building. It's been written about. It's got the clock that's goofy, and if you look at it, it's a little bit it's not symmetrical in parts, but that's the building that people are like, oh my goodness, that's the coolest building ever. Right? So can you talk about like, how do you, architecture, I guess, is one thing, but how do you decide the decorative art elements that go into that? I mean, is it collaborative? Is that just you and no one talked to me and I'm going to come up with this? I mean, it seems like a creative genius kind of thing.
Well, yes, and no one talked to me. I love that part. I mean, let's not get too complicated here. I don't need to vote on stuff.
Yeah.
I want to make those decisions.
Mm-hmm.
There are so many other things I have to filter it through that starts to shape the building. Once again, very difficult building, very small lot, 38 by 54 or something like that. And how do you get the cars on and the stairs on? I mean, it comes down to cars around here. Get a car in there. What do you got left? Elevator, stairs, separation of exits. So that's what we have. I'm going to get to that decorative part in a second, but they also, this owner at the time had a feng shui consultant. They didn't want me to build anything in the center. So I end up taking advantage of that and end up with these Escher-esque stairs that kind of wind away to get to an exit or to get to where the feng shui person wanted to get in facing the mountains, stuff like that. So I kind of liked those odd requests because it gives me a building you won't see somewhere else. And I obviously just got back from Spain because you can see where I stole building, the idea of that building in southern Spain, Sevilla in particular. They just use that gold band everywhere, that gold paint. And so I was so turned on by those buildings in southern Spain. I let that one pop out right there. And then you just start playing with proportion and balance, openings, voids, solids, decoration, which was a curse word in architecture school, by the way. And then I got
they teach you not to do that stuff.
Decoration. So I'm breaking all the rules I learned in college, but in one way, in another way, I'm doing them all.
Yeah.
But and then the ironwork, I sort of put the ironwork on with how much strength it needs to be for the type of building, visual strength, and the idea of the ironwork. But then I get with my brother and things might change. Let's go look at this building. What do we really think? And so we might have to alter part of the design to make it a better project. So, like for instance, that ironwork on the buildings, that and El Zapato, the ironwork, we wanted it to frame the sky because you're looking at it from above, right? So we really wanted to make that the silhouette of the ironwork part of your experience. And if you have someone like my brother, there's nothing that's not doable here. With Dan Upton, the contractor, and my brother, I can get out the softest pencil or the wettest paintbrush, and we can have fun with that because they're not scared by any idea here. Mm-hmm. And of course they'll bring a lot more ideas to my brother will just sort of fold in a whole nother way of looking at things.
Mm-hmm. And so your brother does the ironwork, much of the ironwork for your project. All of it. Okay. So that's real collaborative. I mean, would you be able to do that with somebody who wasn't your brother, you think? You kind of know each other so well.
Not a chance.
Yeah.
I mean, let's walk over a building sometime. I'll show you.
Yeah.
And it's unreproducible because it's done at that moment for that building at that specific location, and each piece reacts to the plaster next to it or to the bin there. So he also takes like I do with buildings. He will also, this is David Shelton, by the way, is his name.
Mm-hmm.
Takes every ironwork piece as if it's his last piece and the most important piece. So it's that little handrail in the back. It might be the best handrail you've ever seen. It doesn't really matter. It's no front and back. It's just as important. It doesn't really matter.
Can you talk about the clock and where that came from?
Yeah, the clock was, so originally I designed this for a guy, crazy guy, crazy in a good way, a friend. He had a travel agent, kind of a high-end travel agency special trip thing. So he was going to have his travel agency on the second floor and live on the top floors. So the idea was to have a clock. You know, I said, we've got to have a clock on this like they do on travel. You know, you're traveling it. And so, but I want to just screw up all the numbers because time is different everywhere. So it just messed this whole thing up. And you know, as you do that, then you, what are the numbers like? So they're very Dali-esque numbers. That is, they kind of twist out, but the shadows are these stretched out, warped time numbers.
Right.
And in fact, the inspector saw those and said, "Jeff, you got to take those down." I said, "Go look at the plans." And sure enough, they're all screwed. They're all messed up on the plans. Whether anybody had ever seen that or focused on it, I'm not sure.
So, talking about one of your other projects, looking at the Vera Cruz building or the Vera Cruz house, that's a little different, right? That's a bunch of like artists. Artists have been allowed to put up their work on the house, and it creates this very creative, memorable facade. Tell me about that project. How did that come to be? And again, you know, super creative and colorful, and people look at that house and stare at it, you know, for a long time.
Well, quite simply, a client who had designed his house already at this point, not sure what else, but he came in and said, "I bought this lot, Jeff." And he told me where it was. And it was like a Thursday or something. Great, fantastic. He says, "You have time to do something?" "Of course I do. I'll do anything for this client." And I said, "Come back in the morning." And it just hit me with those old little, this is a brand new building. All the buildings around it, you know, turn of the century buildings. Needs to be a wooden looking building. And, but I don't know. Okay, here's, when did these things hit you? Maybe it was just so deep into my soul that the house we used to go look at was the Sanford Darling house over on Rancho Rio Street. And this guy, when he was 68, started painting his house with paintings all over it. So as a kid, you know, a 8-year-old, we would take little pilgrimages there to look at this guy who's gone crazy, right? or what some people might say, but I think he was, you know, just he was doing what he felt to do. And he did scenes all around this house, Sanford Darling house. And this was, he painted refrigerator, doormats, roof, everything, and of places he'd been. So I showed my client, I did a little watercolor. We're gonna have paintings all over this. He said, "Let's do it." So see, I find good clients. He says, "How are you gonna get a permit?" I said, "Don't worry about that. That's my job. That's why you hired me." And the city, once again, the review board says, they started to balk on it, and then I remember these couple women on the panel said, "Go, let Jeff do this one. I mean, this is a good idea." And then they said they wanted to tell me what colors to use, and they said, "No, let Jeff pick his own colors and their own paintings, and just don't make them rude, don't make them obscene or political." So I got the job, and you don't think about really how you're going to do it. If you did that, you probably wouldn't do it. Right? I could never tell you how to do this job. So I just said I'd do it. And then got the word out, "Hey, anybody want to do painting for me?" And here's what's going to happen. Go pick. And so we had all the panels cut and numbered. So people, I want number 32, you know, and I'm 32. I told them, no dolphins, no rainbows, no unicorns, something like that, and no political, no obscene, and a place for your thumb, something that turns you on, something I've never painted before. I don't care. Make it bold. I said, it's outside, make it bold. And we didn't know until November 2013, I got paintings everywhere in our house. I got paint all over all my clothes. We didn't know what this was going to look like until we put it up in one day. We stuck them all up in one day. Mm-hmm. And, it worked. It was better than I'd imagined. Yeah. And every painting there has a great little story to it that whoever painted it has some rich story behind it, why they painted that little scene in the forest, something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I read that you only do architecture in Santa Barbara. You grew up, in the area, and you take pride in that. Is that correct? Is this the only place you want to do your buildings, or do you have other stuff other places?
Well, let me see. Hopefully, I'll take pride in what I put out there. At least have the not be ashamed of it. Let's put it that way. I'm not sure what the word would be, but I do the best on every project. I did work in LA before I moved back up here in 94. But it was chaotic down there. Nothing fit, great project, piece of crap, great project. Gas station, mini mall. No one, who cares? Great architects, of course, down there doing great things, but and the system's chaotic, just absolutely chaotic. So I got up here and we had two small children at the time, and I just didn't want to work out of town. The kids were small, so perfectly happy working here. So, and I like being a local. That it's all you shop locally, get local food. Let's hire local people. Let's hire all these friends I know, these artists that I know. So it sort of brings everybody together. People invest. When we do one of these buildings, we've got a lot of people invested their heart and soul into it, artists and things. And so I think that helps the town. It gives the town a little bit of richness of all these investments that people put their heart and soul into. Mm-hmm. So I think that's why I love working here. Yeah. It is harder for me, since I'm such a singular designer here, working out of town. It's kind of a pain in the ass, but I don't not take work out of town. I turn it down quite a bit.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, do you have I feel like if I had a budget of somebody who could own a house in Montecito and I wanted something that was like really cool, I'd call you up and say, hey, can you design me a guest house or, this room? Like, do you get stuff like that, or is it mostly you do get a lot of that? Okay.
And look, I'm looking for a good client. I don't care if it's the biggest house ever, the most expensive house. I want a client that comes in here and is not scared off by this office right here. It's a relationship for 3 years at least. It's got to work. Yeah. And if I see they're looking for something else, I'll send them to an architect that does that particular thing really well, a lot better than me. Mm-hmm. So it's got to be this marriage that works, or they don't want it and I don't want it. Yeah. I've done houses in Montecito. They're just not on this. They're not as exposed as all these downtown here, these 7 or 8 down here. Yeah. Right in this in a wider circle, there's probably 20 here, okay, down this downtown. So these get more attention. These houses play with semantics more in what is this architecture we're working with, what is history, what is craftsmanship, what are artists, how do we keep it in house, how do we keep control of it? But there's a different language we get to play with downtown here. Montecito, I've done some houses came out very well. So, but once again, it's the client that's got to want it too.
A couple of things. Let's take a step back from your work and sort of talk about Santa Barbara. Obviously, State Street's in transition. There's all this talk about State Street master plan. parklets, outdoor dining. The State Street's kind of cluttered, depending on your perspective, whatever you want to call it, say it. Do you have any thoughts on what downtown can look like from an architectural and aesthetic perspective? You obviously, are working on the 700 State Street building. There's talk of housing downtown. Is this something that crosses your mind? Do you think about State Street? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh, definitely.
Uh-huh.
It should be it should be a pedestrian street. It's long past due. It takes a pandemic for us to do it, and then people, oh yeah, I see that does work. So yes, this is the perfect climate for outdoor seating and outdoor living, and get the cars, and I hate to say it, get the bikes and off that pedestrian zone. Let's just make it all pedestrian. You can walk your bike, etc. But this is one speed. Let's get all the speeds the same, so no one gets hurt. But it's lively. We've been sitting out there at the James Joyce Bar now for the last 8 weeks since we got back to this stuff, and it feels like you're somewhere else because you realize you never do that here. When you sit in the street when you're someplace in Spain, not here.
Yeah.
So why don't we do it? And this is a tourist town. Let's face it. It wasn't that growing up here. I don't know if you grew up, but it was just more of a sleepy little town here. So let's face it. It is a tourist town, and people do like hanging out more than they did. And as far as clutter, I'm not sure what they're talking about. Yeah, they put a bunch of stuff up here to get through the pandemic because there were no rules. Everyone would have taken a little bit more time if they knew it was going to be permanent, right? People are just throwing stuff up there trying to keep their restaurant in business.
Yeah.
So clutter, I'm for more. I'm for more stuff, definitely. More action. We don't want cars out there.
Yeah.
And then slowly we're going to get, or maybe quickly, we're going to get a lot more people living down there too.
Right.
So you're going to see those buildings go up, which I think is the right answer. Whether any of my friends or anybody can afford these places, that's another story. And that's the tragedy of this town. But we do need, if housing's going to go, let's put it up there instead of up the Gaviota Coast.
Yeah. Have you ever served on an ABR or HLC?
No.
And would that be torture for you?
Yeah. It'd be torture for them. I don't think. If you look at something I bring in, I put a lot of thought into every detail I show them. Okay. I put a lot of thought, and so I would expect on more public projects people to put a lot of thought in, right? If it's an addition to a house back there, there's a lot of breaks here, by the way. We want people to have inexpensive living, but if it's part of the town fabric, I would expect people to bring in a lot of great details, and I'll critique them. So that would probably last a couple of weeks, and they'd kindly ask me to leave.
All right. Well, on that note, Jeff, I want to thank you for taking this time. Your work is incredible. It's memorable. Obviously, that's just from a journalist's perspective, but it is something that it is true. My kids, and I've got the 7-year-old and a 15-year-old, and both of them have said, "Daddy, look at that," and it's one of your buildings.
That's the best thing I could hear. Bring them into the office sometime.
Oh, okay. Yeah, they would love that.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Any kids are welcome.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks a lot. Appreciate your time, and good luck with everything you do going forward.
Thank you, Josh. Appreciate it.